Hello, listeners, and welcome to Slide Into Sports live on 103.1 FM on WVLP Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Schleier, and this week of college sports, as always, is super crazy. But why is it crazy, we may ask? Well, it's because college sports is very situational. It's a very situational thing, especially in, really college football and basketball, obviously, but in every sport because, college sports is considered amateur sports, even though, as we all know, the athletes get paid, but you never know what could happen, right? As they say, rivalry games, anything can happen, whether it's a road game for a specific team or, a home game for that specific team, depending on which team you're rooting for in that rivalry, of course. But, anything is possible in college sports, and that is something that we almost saw this weekend. One of the craziest games, even though for college football it was, garbage week for the SEC, as it's called, which, speaking of that, let's all celebrate that this is the last, garbage week in mid-November for college football ever, because the SEC is, as we talked about a few episodes ago, the SEC is going to a 9 in-conference game schedule. So that, FCS week is gone for the SEC in mid-November, which I think will benefit the SEC, and I think it will benefit college football as a whole. Because normally, the end of November is supposed to be super exciting, everything comes down to the wire, but it doesn't really feel like anything's coming down to the wire when, you've got Georgia playing 1-9 Charlotte, right? Or Texas A&M playing Stanford, or Alabama playing Eastern Illinois. Some of the SEC games were pretty electric. You look at Oklahoma, Missouri. That was a ranked-on-ranked matchup. That was amazing. You look at USC, Oregon. That had playoff implications as essentially a playoff elimination game for both of those teams. It was still a chaotic weekend for college football, but college basketball also had some crazy, crazy outcomes. You look at number 17 Michigan State upsetting Kentucky, and not just upsetting them, but blowing them out of the water, 83-66. And this was in the Blue Bloods tournament. And Duke, number 5 Duke, beat Kansas 78-66. It felt a little closer, but Duke was largely in control of that game. Then on Wednesday, Arizona, it was a number 4 Arizona team versus a number 3 UConn team. Arizona gets the win at the end. Great game played by both teams, but it came down to the wire, and UConn just wasn't able to close it out, and Arizona gets the win. And Arizona is one of the teams where they have an argument to be number 1 team in the country possibly. And Alabama, also another college basketball team that even though they have a loss, they have the argument to possibly be number 1 team in the country as well. Granted, their one loss is to the number 1 team in the country currently, which is Purdue. But on Wednesday, number 11 Alabama beat number 8 Illinois 90-86. Another really close game and an upset. Last week when we were looking at some of these games, these college basketball games, they were very close, but the team that was ranked higher won. The team that was favored won. So this week, a little bit different for college basketball, which is good. It's nice to spice things up a little bit. On Friday, BYU played number 23 ranked Wisconsin. BYU ranked number 9, of course. They won 98-70. Pretty dominant performance by BYU overall. Then Louisville, Cincinnati, same day. They had a pretty close game. Cincinnati currently unranked. Louisville ranked number 6, but very close game between these two teams. It was relatively back and forth in the first half. Cincinnati, got up to a 10-point lead at one point, or at least was holding a 10-point lead at one point in the first half. They got up to, I believe, a 14 or 15-point lead at the very start of the game. But Louisville was able to come back in the beginning of the second half and maintain a 10-point lead for a large part of the second half. And it ended up being a 10-point victory for Louisville, 74-64. There was also Purdue versus Texas Tech that same night as well. Number 1 ranked Purdue, number 15 ranked Texas Tech. Purdue won 86-56, and Purdue was dominant the entire game. There was, just probably the best game that Purdue has played so far this year. They looked great in every aspect of the ball: offense, defense, perimeter shooting, paint. Like it was a great all around game by Purdue, and what a win! I mean, number 15 ranked Texas Tech, who last year made it pretty far in the March Madness tournament. So I mean that's a strong win by the Boilermakers right there. And on Sunday, Duke beat Howard 93-56. So I mean that was not necessarily supposed to be a competitive matchup, but the score, I mean, that was pretty dominant score right there. Some college football scores that, I mean, we talked about some of them already. Oregon, USC. I mean, we at least talked about that game having implications just a moment ago, but Oregon, number 7 Oregon, hosted number 15 USC, and they beat them 42-27. Oregon was in control for a large portion of that game, and it pretty much sealed the deal when Oregon had a punt return that went back for a touchdown, and USC just not able to come back. That defense was not able to hold up against Oregon's offense, and Oregon's defense was just way too physical for the Southern California offense. Just way too physical. I mean, USC tried to do a few trick run plays, but Oregon, they were on top of it. They were ready for it. So Oregon, big win there. They moved up in the AP poll 2 spots after that, or 1 spot after that win. They move up to the number 5 spot in the AP poll. We'll see where they end up in the CFP poll on Tuesday. But on Tuesday last week, they were I believe they were also ranked 7th, if I'm not mistaken. So Oregon still in the top 10. They've pretty much solidified their spot in the playoffs, even though they are probably not going to the Big Ten championship. But because they have that head-to-head win over USC, and if Michigan beats Ohio State, Oregon could have a rematch against Indiana in the Big Ten championship in Indianapolis in a couple weeks. So that is something to watch out for going into next week. At least that, the game, the implications that game has within the Big Ten. Missouri, Oklahoma, that's another one where we kind of talked about the implications and it being a pretty hyped up game. Missouri controlled the game for a large part of it. For about 20 minutes, they were up 3-0. Their defense was locking down Oklahoma, but then one big play later, Oklahoma gets the touchdown, takes the lead, and they didn't look back. I mean, defensively, they held Missouri to 6 points. It would have been 9 points, but Oklahoma, they got a blocked field goal, and that held Missouri back as well. Like, there was just a lot of things that went Oklahoma's way in that game. And I mean, it being in Oklahoma, I think definitely helped as well. Syracuse, Notre Dame. Now the score, 70-7, but I kind of wanted to talk about this one a little bit simply because of how they got there. Because Notre Dame scored 21 points in that game in 5.5 minutes without their offense taking the field. Like, think about that. Like, their offense didn't even take the field, and they put up 21 points. That's actually insane. That's next level insane. Notre Dame had 2 pick sixes, and they had a punt return, and that's how they got those 21 points. And Jeremiah Love had himself a game too. He scored 3 touchdowns, 170-plus yards rushing. A really great game for Jeremiah Love to, keep him towards the front of the Heisman race. Definitely a top 2 Heisman performance that game, even though it was against Syracuse, who was playing their 3rd-string quarterback. But I mean, Jeremiah Love isn't playing against the Syracuse quarterback; he's playing against their defense. So, yeah. Kansas State, they were in a shootout at Utah, and Utah, they love to score points, but apparently they just let Kansas State run all over them. I mean, when I was watching that game, Kansas State had so many amazing runs that Utah just could not stop. But Utah, they're just one of those teams where, I mean, this was kind of their Pac-12 days coming out a little bit, because I mean, if you guys remember the Pac-12 teams, they love to put up points. They love to run up the scoreboard. Very offensive-minded teams in the Big 12. And Utah, they reminded us of that. They put up 51 points to Kansas State's 47, had a couple 2-point conversions go their way in the game, and that's what gave them the win. So, great game by both teams, and Kansas State kind of trying to get themselves out of a funk that they had at the beginning of the year, losing in week 0 and losing to Army, I believe, in week 2 or 3, having a close game with North Dakota State in either week 1 or 2. Just a really slow start for the Wildcats, but they've started to kind of come back. They need to win their next game to go bowling, though. But critical win for the Utes to keeping their playoff hopes alive. Miami, they played Virginia Tech at Virginia Tech. As we remember from last year, Virginia Tech gave Miami a little bit of trouble, but they played in mid-October. This time they were playing in November. It was at Virginia Tech. And James Franklin, the new head coach of Virginia Tech for next year. So that's another, big piece of news that happened last week. They finalized that deal with James Franklin. He's now going to be, in a way, competing against Penn State, at least recruiting-wise, and that's going to kind of screw Penn State over a little bit. But I think that was part of what he had in mind when he was trying to, find a spot. He's like, how can I get back at Penn State for letting me go when they let me go? I mean, I don't necessarily think that's exactly what he was thinking, but, it just happens to work out that way. But Miami, they ended up coming out with the win. They won 34-17. Miami starting to look like the team that we saw at the beginning of the year when they beat Notre Dame in that close game. Except they're now, I feel like they're putting their foot down more. They're finishing their games stronger. Obviously they slipped up against SMU and Louisville, but, if Alabama can have a bad game against Florida State and lose one to Oklahoma, then, a loss is a loss. Like, teams lose in college football, except for Ohio State, Indiana, and Texas A&M as of right now. But, yeah, it takes a lot to go undefeated at this point in the season in college football. So, I mean, Miami, still a good team. Obviously, they had a low point, but, they still have a shot at the playoffs. Even if they don't, I think even if they don't make it to the ACC title, they still have a shot. Because I think once they get into the same comparative pool as Notre Dame, then that's Miami's way in. They just need to keep winning their games. They play Pitt this coming Saturday. That game is going to be everything for the Hurricanes. It's going to make or break their season that they've had. So, and speaking of Pitt, they just killed Georgia Tech. They were up 28-0 at one point in the game at the very beginning. And Georgia Tech, they started to kind of crawl their way back at the end of the first half, making the score 28-14. And then Pittsburgh, they answered with 7 points. They also got a 100-yard pick six that went in their favor. And Georgia Tech, dug themselves too big of a hole, and they just couldn't climb out of it, and that was that. I mean, I think, Haynes King, obviously still a great quarterback, but Georgia Tech now going to be in full desperation mode when they go to Atlanta to play their arch rivals, the Georgia Bulldogs. And something I've been thinking about even before this game was, if Pitt beats Georgia Tech and Georgia Tech beats Georgia, what is the committee going to do? Because that's just one chaos scenario out of many that could happen this coming Saturday in college football. Texas, they play Arkansas, and this is kind of an old rivalry that's been brought back. Both these teams having a history of making the national championships and playing each other way back when, before some of us were born, before I was born. But Texas, they get the blowout win over Arkansas, 52-37. Obviously, Arkansas, I think they're probably one of the best 2-win teams in the country, but defense is what wins games. And Arkansas, they just didn't bring it on the defensive side of the ball. It was very close in the first half, but Texas ran away in the third quarter and just did not look back. Texas, obviously trying to make a case to get into the college football playoffs as a 3-loss team. And, style points, the committee likes those at this point in the year. You need style points to kind of, climb up the rankings more. I mean, that could be what maybe puts Texas over Vanderbilt in the committee's eyes, even though, Texas did beat Vandy, but Vandy also has the better record than Texas. So, and it's also statement win right before A&M, because what happens if Texas beats Texas A&M? Does Texas somehow sneak into the playoffs? Does A&M fall out of the top 4 possibly? There's some things that can happen there if Texas were to win that game. But the way both these teams are playing, I think it will probably be a shootout because, both their defenses give up a lot of points. And Marcel Reed and Arch Manning, they can launch the ball downfield if, at will. So it'll definitely be an interesting game for sure. It's played Friday night, 6:30 Central, same time as Indiana-Purdue. Just going to be, I think it's going to be a very interesting game to watch for sure. Michigan, they blow out Maryland 45-20, and that was one where last week I said maybe Michigan has trouble. Maybe Michigan struggles against Maryland, a team that forces turnovers. Maybe Michigan struggles because they're looking ahead to Ohio State. I was wrong. I was big wrong there. Maryland did put up 20, and they kept it close kind of in the beginning, but Michigan ran away with it. They showed that even though they don't have their star running back, Justice, Michigan, they could still, ground and pound the ball. They can still, blow teams out. It's not just one player on that team that Michigan has that can, be productive. And they showed that in that game against Maryland. Wisconsin gets another win after beating Illinois 27-10. Now, I had a feeling this could happen because Wisconsin was able to beat Washington, and Washington blew the doors off of Illinois. So I was a little fearful for this Illinois team because they were going into Camp Randall to play a very physical Wisconsin team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Wisconsin, they have a pretty decent pass rush. They can apply pressure, and that's what they did. And, we saw, this is something that I've talked about for Illinois where they've had a problem. Duke, able to apply pressure to the quarterback and either sack him or force him to make a mistake. Indiana did the same thing to Illinois. Washington did the same thing. Illinois, they need to get better at protecting Luke Altmaier. And unfortunately for them, they did not do a good job of it against Wisconsin. And ultimately, that's what got Wisconsin the victory. Illinois' secondaries also, like I've said, previous broadcasts, their secondaries on defense are not that great. And Wisconsin, they've struggled at throwing the ball, and they exposed the Illinois secondary in that game a little bit. So, remember when Wisconsin played Washington, their punter had the most throwing yards. That's how much Wisconsin was struggling with throwing the ball at the quarterback position. So, yeah, I think that paints a pretty vivid picture as to how terrible this loss is for Illinois. Wisconsin, they stormed the field after this win, which a little sad, but you know what? After the year Wisconsin's had, let him have it. Let him go. Let him storm the field. Let him be happy, right? SMU versus Louisville. This was a game that had implications for the ACC title. SMU completing their last, or Louisville completing their last ACC game. They lost to SMU. They were down their quarterback and star running back, and they just could not be productive at all. SMU blows them out 38-6. SMU, I think, even though they're at 3 losses, they are only a 1-loss ACC team. I think the committee will likely put SMU back into the top 25 because there are 3-loss teams in the top 25 right now. I mean, Missouri was a 3-loss team in the top 25 last week. Tennessee was a 3-loss team in the top 25 last week. Texas was a 3-loss team in the top 25 last week. And we're at that point in the year where, at least 13 games have been played, or 11 to 12 games have been played by these teams. And, it's going to be more common to see a 2-loss team or a 3-loss team at this point in the year. So it's going to become more, in a way, socially acceptable for, a 3-loss team to be in the top 25. So SMU, great win for them. And this increases their likelihood of getting into the ACC title. I mean, at this point, they're probably in because it's between them and Virginia, who are the only 2 remaining 1-loss ACC teams. So SMU, they went out. They're in. They're in the ACC title. Virginia, they went out. They play Virginia Tech this coming weekend. Virginia's in, and it's going to be Virginia versus SMU. And in that scenario, I think that is how the ACC gets 2 teams in, whether it be if Miami somehow gets into the top 10, and let's just say SMU wins the ACC title and is ranked 23rd or something, right, as a 3-loss team. SMU would get either the 11th or 12th spot, and that would put Miami would have to get 10th at minimum. They would need to be in the 10th spot. And, that game at Notre Dame, that game against Notre Dame at Hard Rock at the beginning of the year, I think the committee, like I said earlier, if they're in the same comparative pool, like both Miami and Notre Dame have been playing great football the past 2-3 weeks. So I think we could see Miami sneak their way in. Notre Dame being at 9, maybe. I could see Bama being at 8, Oklahoma at 7, like at the end of the year. Obviously, Alabama needs to beat Auburn, and it's at Jordan-Hare. That's going to be a scary game for them. But, yeah, those 3 teams, they're right on the bubble. They're right on the edge. One of them is going to possibly miss out. Maybe 2. Because if BYU beats Texas Tech in a rematch, assuming that BYU goes to the Big 12 title, then one of those teams is going to miss out because Texas Tech, at least last week, was ranked 5th. I don't think the committee is going to punish Texas Tech for losing to BYU and being a 2-loss team and only having the second loss because they were in their conference title game. So really tough position for the committee and for those teams at this point. A lot of chaos there. And you know what we love here? We love chaos in college football. The last score that I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit because I thought it was pretty funny was Western Kentucky versus LSU. And the only reason I bring this up is because, everyone says that, it's garbage week for the SEC. I mean, I literally said this, 10 minutes ago. But Western Kentucky LSU was a 3-point game. 3-point game. And, I mean, granted, it was only a 3-point game because LSU fumbled the ball with less than 90 seconds left, and Western Kentucky ran it back for a touchdown, making the score 13-10. But really shows that, LSU, it's just the downfall of LSU is just crazy to me because everyone thought that LSU was going to win the national title and, Garrett Nussmeier was going to be the Heisman Trophy winner. And Brian Kelly was going to finally hoist a national championship trophy, and it just all fell apart right before our eyes. Garrett Nussmeier getting benched a couple weeks ago, Brian Kelly getting fired the week before that, and just taking the losses that they took, and it just, and now a close game against Western Kentucky. I mean, there was a time maybe 3-4 years ago where people were making fun of Indiana for having close games against Western Kentucky. So just something to think about there. Like, it's just crazy to see a program like LSU in that spot where they're only beating Western Kentucky by 3 points. I mean, yes, they did win, and the thing that matters is that they won. But again, I'm just saying, we've made fun of other programs for losing, or not losing, but winning in close games against teams that are supposed to be inferior. So, yeah, just insane, just so insane to me. The AP poll, let's just go through that really quick. I'm not really going to go through the top 15, 18. I more want to talk about the lower teams, 20 through 25, because I think that carries the most weight in the AP poll, because, I mean, the top 12, the AP and the CFP committee are going to have, the same top 12, minus a few spots, minus 2 spots, or it might be different. I think Texas Tech was 5th in the CFP poll, and Texas Tech is 7th in the AP this week. So, I think the AP values the Big Ten, or at least Oregon in the Big Ten more than Texas Tech in the Big 12. But I think CFP committee has shown that they do have, some kind of respect for the Big 12 this year. So, yeah, that's largely the only difference that I've seen between the AP and the CFP committee. But the reason why I like looking at the bottom 5 teams in the AP poll is because that is going to carry weight a little bit when you're looking at the bottom 5 or the bottom 6, 7, 8 teams, where you're looking at the group of 5. Where is the group of 5 teams ranked? Which group of 5 conference has the most value, or which group of 5 conference is projected to have the college football playoff spot? And the past 2 weeks, it's been an American Athletic Conference team. Last week, it was Tulane. The week before that, it was South Florida. This week, though, it's a little bit tighter of a race, I think, because 20, 21, and 22, all group of 5 teams, but the AP has James Madison at 20 after beating Washington State 24-20, which goes against what the CFP committee has been doing, which is having either North Texas, Tulane, South Florida, or a American Athletic Conference team above the Sun Belt team like James Madison. So, a little bit of contrast there, but North Texas is at 21 and Tulane is at 22 after they both took their respective wins. North Texas beating Rice 56-24 and Tulane beating Temple 37-13. So on Tuesday, the thing to look at is whether or not the committee is going to go with the AP poll and bump James Madison up. I mean, I guess I could see why they wouldn't, because the American Athletic Conference overall has more wins against Power 4 opponents than the Sun Belt. But I think there is a world where maybe the committee bumps JMU above Tulane after the comments that the Tulane coaches made about his surprise in being in the top 25, at all, by the CFP committee. So maybe the committee will just be like, you know what, we'll move him out. And maybe they move JMU. Maybe they move James Madison up there. Maybe they move North Texas in their spot. Maybe they move Tulane out just because of, what the coach said about his own team. So, again, just something to keep an eye on. Also, just kind of going back to what I was saying about like 2-loss and 3-loss teams, there's a lot of 3-loss teams in the AP poll. I will say they have SMU at 25, Pitt at 24, USC at 19, Tennessee at 18, and Texas at 16, which, I mean, that's 5 3-loss teams in the AP top 25. So, again, don't be surprised when there's like 3 to 5 3-loss teams in the top 25. I mean, we have seen people like Paul Feinbaum or like any SEC people make arguments for teams like Texas to still be in the top 25 despite being 8-3, because Texas scheduled a Power 4 non-conference matchup in Ohio State that they did not need to schedule. So Texas hypothetically could be 9-2, which that is the argument that like they're making over at ESPN. And I mean, I get it. Like, one loss to the number 1 team in the country, like, that's not a bad loss to have. It's still a loss, but it's not a bad one to have. However, my only counter to that is they lost to Florida, who is towards the bottom of the SEC conference right now. And they fired their head coach, and their quarterback is like a turnover king. He has more interceptions than touchdowns, or at least he did like last week. So it's like they're looking at one piece of the pie. They're not looking at the whole big picture, like their entire schedule overall. I mean, you also have to take into account that Texas took Mississippi State to overtime. They took Kentucky to overtime. And those are 2 teams, again, that are towards the bottom of the SEC. So for me, it's a little bit harder to be like Texas should be in the top like 15, 16, which they're at 16 in the AP poll. I think the only thing to me really that's kind of keeping Texas up there is that they beat Vandy. They gave Vandy their second loss, which, okay, fine. Like, if you just say that, then I'd be like, okay, Texas, like, be in the top 25. Because like I said earlier, like, you're going to see more 3-loss teams at this point in the year in the top 25. So, like, I think in my mind, they're pushing the wrong argument. And I think they're doing that because they want the SEC to not schedule a Power 4 non-conference matchup, because they see it as punishment when the CFP committee has said that next year they're going to factor strength of schedule. Sorry, frog in my throat right there, but they're going to factor strength of schedule more. Like, they're going to value it more. And you even see it this year. Like, they're valuing strength of schedule a lot more, because look at Alabama, right? Alabama, 2 losses, lost to Oklahoma, like, very close game. Fine. Like, cool. But they also lost to Florida State. So, like, but Bama has also beaten ranked Missouri, ranked Tennessee, ranked Georgia. Like, they have great wins on their schedule, and they ran a gauntlet. They were the first team to beat like 4 to 5 ranked teams in a row. So it's like, again, you just got to look at the whole picture, because some people that only like the SEC or only like the Big 10 or only like the Big 12 or whatever, they look at the pieces of the puzzle that they want to create to, paint their conference or their team in the best image possible. And I try my best not to do that. Because it's not fair. Like, there's no reason to do that. Because in my mind, it eliminates parity. It eliminates parity between the conferences if you're, constantly just propping yourself up and like pushing the others down. And like in the case of like the SEC and Big Ten, like they have, they have powerful networks backing them. So like in a way, the Big Ten and SEC have just kind of become the bullies in college sports. So, I try to be as biased as I possibly can. Even though I am an IU fan, and I like, if you've listened long enough, you probably know that, but like, oh well. Anyway, so we're going to go into these basketball games that are coming up and football games that are coming up. And there's a lot of things to go over with all of these games because for college football, it's rivalry weekend, and college basketball, it's starting to heat up. We're getting towards the end of these out of conference matchups. So before we get into all of that, I have a message from our sponsor. This broadcast is brought to you by Authentic Impact, a Northwest Indiana executive coaching practice working with family businesses to ensure their legacy. When you started your business, you made a promise to do things differently, better than anyone else. Over time, as the business grows, that promise can get diluted or even lost. Penny Schleier at Authentic Impact helps family business owners reignite that promise, weaving it into team engagement, performance, and hiring so your passion becomes the heartbeat of your company again. Learn more at authentic-impact-coaching.com. All right, let's start off with college basketball. So on Monday, we've got a ranked-on-ranked matchup with St. John's versus Iowa State, a Big East versus Big 12 matchup. I think should be very interesting just because, with St. John's, they obviously have a lot of players from the transfer portal. Pitino has come out and said that they largely, have their players from the transfer portal. They're playing at the Michelob Ultra Arena, which it says like at Iowa State. Iowa State, they've become a very perimeter shooting team. And I think in this situation, if they hit their shots, if they get the home crowd behind them, I think Iowa State could get the job done. But, of course, St. John's, they have great coaching with Pitino. He's great at getting his guys to do what, he needs them to do. So I think this matchup will be a very, very close matchup. I think this should be a very close matchup between these two teams because the Big 12 and Big East right now are seen as two of the best conferences in college basketball, if not the best conferences in college basketball, like all around, besides the SEC. But obviously there is some recency bias with the Big East, with UConn winning 2 national titles in a row, Big 12, having Kansas and Iowa State and, adding in Arizona as well, just, bringing in more premier teams into their conference. So, and that was recent as well. That was relatively recent. So, again, a lot of recency bias with these two conferences, but still very, very good conferences in college basketball. A lot of competitive games, like weekly. So, I'd mark that game for sure. It's at 3:30 p.m. So, I would just keep an eye on that game for sure. We also have Gonzaga versus Alabama. Alabama, ever since losing to Purdue, has kind of been on a tear. Gonzaga, they've been pretty great as well. Gonzaga, they have a relatively young team, but it's tomorrow night. It's at MGM Arena at Alabama, and Alabama, they've been on fire, like I said, since losing to Purdue, and they're playing at home. So I really like the situation for Alabama here. So I think Alabama gets the win. Now, I think it'll probably be by round 10. I don't necessarily think it'll be a blowout win because Mark Few is one of the greatest coaches in college basketball. He has taken teams inferior to other teams in March Madness to the Sweet 16. Like before last year, he had he had taken his team to the Sweet 16 like 8+ years in a row. He just knows how to be successful in college basketball, no matter who's on his team. Kind of like Pitino, he knows how to get his guys to be successful. He knows how to lead them to success. So that's largely why I think this should be a very close game. On Tuesday, we have, Iowa State versus Creighton. Iowa State with a doubleheader. And Creighton, they were previously ranked, but they're no longer ranked. But Creighton's still a consistent Big East basketball program. They can be sneaky. Like Creighton is one of those teams, like kind of like Alabama, where they shoot a lot from outside the arc. So if Creighton's hitting their threes, Iowa State could be in a very dangerous spot. So I think Iowa State could come out with the win. However, Creighton going in rested, that could be a dangerous situation for the Cyclones. So I could see an upset here by Creighton over Iowa State. So that's at 1 p.m. on Tuesday. So, yeah, I would keep an eye on that. There's also ranked-on-ranked matchup, Tennessee versus Houston. Tennessee, coached by Rick Barnes. He's pretty good. He's a pretty good coach. He has, kind of like Mark Few, he's led his team to consistent success. He knows how to get his guys to be successful. Houston, last year, they made it to the final. So I think Houston should win this game, even just based on that. Sampson, also an elite coach. Like it's going to be a really fun matchup because both of these coaches are amazing. So very curious to see how their plays and schemes, clash against each other in that game. There's also Michigan versus Auburn. Michigan ranked 7th, Auburn ranked 22nd. I think Michigan has played a couple close games the past couple weeks that have made me a little nervous, like Wake Forest, taking Wake Forest to overtime, not exactly the best look. But, a win is a win, and Michigan is they're just geared to win those close games. So I think if Auburn makes it a close game, I think, Michigan will probably come out with the win there. Obviously, Auburn, they have new coaching right now, but again, it's at Michelob Ultra Stadium. So I think Michigan should come out with the win, but Auburn maybe gets the upset. I mean, there's always that chance. Again, you never know in college sports, but I like Michigan in this game. Because Auburn has also had some really close games that could have easily not gone their way. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with those two teams. On Thursday, UNC, Michigan State, 17-18, going up against each other. It's at 3:30 p.m. Thursday. Michigan State, they've looked really good. I mean, they just tore up a Kentucky team, so it's hard for me to not think Michigan State is going to do the same thing to UNC. But UNC, also a blue blood program that has history of consistent success. And if there's one thing in college sports, a lot of times you see teams where if they have a good history and they're consistent, like North Carolina, they find ways to win. So I think this one should be a close game. But, I mean, after the way Michigan State played Kentucky, again, it's hard for me to not think Michigan State is not going to come out with the wins. So give me Michigan State against the Tar Heels here in a nice Thursday afternoon game. Then there's 21-ranked Arkansas going up against the 5th-ranked Duke Blue Devils. And this one also interesting because Arkansas, obviously, they have Calipari coaching. Arkansas typically, and Calipari typically have younger teams. Calipari loves to recruit the players and develop them instead of just, going to the portal. He has a very different approach than Patino and a lot of the other coaches, but he wins games. So I could see Arkansas coming out with the win against Duke. ACC looked a little bit shaky. Duke obviously doesn't have Cooper Flagg this year. They lost a couple other decent players to the draft, so this could be one where Arkansas could sneak up on Duke and get them, and I think that's what they're going to do. I think Arkansas is going to beat Duke, even though Duke basically dominated Kansas, but I mean, they at least were controlling the game against Kansas, but I mean, Arkansas, they've also looked pretty good, kind of like Michigan State. They played a very close game against a really good Michigan State team at their place. So I think Arkansas, they're tested. I think they're ready. I think they get Duke here. All right, so Friday, and this is the last ranked-unranked matchup that we've got for college basketball, and then we're going to go into rivalry week for college football. We've got Illinois versus UConn. Illinois, obviously, they came off a loss against Alabama. UConn coming off a loss to Arizona. Both close games. Both of these teams are going to be hungry for a win. This is a top 10 matchup, and I feel like it's in Madison Square Garden, too, so they're going to be at a packed venue for sure. But it's hard to coach against Dan Lanning, not Dan Lanning, Dan Hurley, when he is angry and fired up after a loss. So I think UConn will probably end up winning this game. But Illinois, they are pretty solid around the perimeter as well. So if Illinois somehow finds fire, then I don't know if UConn is going to be able to put it out. But UConn, young team, but they are a solid team for sure. Like, they're not one to be trifled with. Hurley, he knows how to get his guys ready. Like a lot of these other coaches in here, like a lot of these college basketball coaches, they know how to get their guys ready and set them up for success. So I think I like UConn in this matchup, but I wouldn't be surprised if Illinois somehow snuck away with the win, because Illinois has been able to do that in previous games. I mean, you look at how close that game was against Alabama. It was a 4-point game. They beat Texas Tech, and they kept it close. The other teams that they've played besides Alabama and Texas Tech, they've largely dominated. So Illinois could be a scary opponent for UConn, but again, like I said, it's really hard for me to go against Dan Hurley and his teams. He gets very fired up, and that's part of the reason why I said Dan Lanning instead of Dan Hurley, because Dan Lanning, the football coach of Oregon, he very high energy individual. So very easy for me to mix the two up. So with that, let's get into these week 14 college football games, rivalry week. Obviously, Friday night slate. There's a lot of games. There's Indiana, Purdue, Texas A&M, Texas, Georgia Tech, the Egg Bowl with Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Arizona State, Iowa, Nebraska. It's a loaded slate Friday night. So let's rapid fire these real quick, because we've only got about 10 minutes left, and there's a lot of games on Saturday that we also have to get to. So here we go. Indiana, Purdue. Even though it's at West Lafayette, the stage is set for a crazy upset, for a chaos scenario to unfold, and one that no one has really talked about yet. But Kurt Cignetti, he gets his guys going for rivalry games like Michigan State and Purdue. He's 1-0 against Purdue right now. He's 2-0 against Michigan State. I think this game, he extends that winning streak against Purdue to 2-0, having Purdue go 2-10 on the season with no Big Ten wins. And I think he does it in blowout fashion, because like I said before, the committee loves style points, and I think that's part of the reason why they favor Notre Dame over Alabama, at least based off of last week's rankings, because Notre Dame has the style points. Even though they haven't played the same schedule as Alabama, they have the style points to kind of back it up. So I think Indiana to kind of solidify their spot at the 2, because they know that number 3, Texas A&M, they're going up against a ranked Texas team. And number 4, Georgia, like Georgia Tech will be ranked somewhere in the AP, in the College Football Playoff Committee poll. So they know that Texas A&M and Georgia are going to have ranked matchups going into this, and they're going to be trying to take Indiana's number 2 spot in the country. So, and this is to secure a bye, because Georgia, if they get a bye without having to go to the SEC title, they're going to get like 5 weeks off. They're going to basically get a month off of playing football and just preparing for whoever their next opponent is going to be. So, again, like team like Georgia is going to fight really hard to solidify either a number 4 spot or or maybe move into the number 3 spot. So, just something to keep an eye out there. For Indiana, like they are going to need to blow Purdue out, I think, in order to, really solidify their spot as the number 2 team in the country, even if they take a loss to Ohio State in the Big Ten title, assuming that Ohio State beats Michigan, of course. Texas A&M, Texas, I kind of said this a little bit earlier. I think it's going to be a shootout. I like Texas A&M in this game, though. Their offense has been largely more consistent. They've been putting up more points per game on their opponents. However, Texas A&M, and this is something that people have finally started to talk about. The reason I say this is because people are giving Indiana so much flack last year about playing the bottom half of the Big Ten. Well, you know what? Texas A&M, you know what they're doing? They're playing the bottom half of the SEC. So, and this is besides Missouri, but still, like, they're playing the bottom half of the conference. So, and people are now finally starting to be like, well, you know what? Maybe Georgia should be above Texas A&M. Like, the conversation finally is happening. So Texas A&M, I think they need this win against Texas, and especially after losing to them last year, I think Texas A&M, they win against Texas, they solidify themselves a bye, whether or not they lose the SEC title. So there's a lot on the line for Texas A&M. They are going into Austin, though, to play the Texas Longhorns, who just came off of a huge win against Arkansas. So we'll see how this game plays out, but I'm thinking it's going to be a shootout. Like, if I would take the over. I don't know what the over is, but whatever the over is, I would take it. Like, if it's only 50 points, I would absolutely kill the over. I would kill the over. So, yeah, that's going to be a fun game to watch as well. Georgia Tech. I think Georgia should win. They have been kind of peaking at the right time. Obviously, this past Saturday, they played Charlotte, but the week before, they played Texas, and they looked elite. They looked really good. Obviously, I'm still kind of questioning how good Texas is, to be honest, so I'm not really sure how great of a win that is for Georgia, but Georgia has beaten Texas the last 3 times they've played them, so make with that what you will. Georgia Tech last year took Georgia to 7 overtimes before Georgia took the game. But Georgia Tech's defense the past 2 weeks has been a problem, has been a major problem. Giving up 28 points to Pitt in the first half is wild. Like, you cannot do that. Because now, like I said before, Georgia Tech does not control their own destiny anymore. So now they're backed into a corner. And teams that are backed into a corner either play really bad or they somehow rise to the occasion and play really good. For Georgia Tech's sake, I hope they rise to the occasion. But I just don't think that's going to happen this time. I think Georgia is going to get the win here, and I think it'll be probably by 10 points. Because Georgia's offense looks really good. Like, they've looked good. So it's hard for me to pick against this Georgia Bulldogs team right now. Ole Miss, Mississippi State. This one kind of interesting because, obviously I think Ole Miss should win that game. I do think Mississippi State this year has enough offensively to maybe keep up a little bit, or at least, in comparison to last year. But I think Ole Miss should get it. They are playing at Mississippi State, though, so Mississippi State, and I've said this like over and over and over again on previous broadcasts, but so I'm really driving this point home, but Mississippi State is one of the toughest places to play. They are one of the toughest places to play. All those cowbells going in sync, it's just so much for an opposing team's offense to handle. So I think Mississippi State could keep it close. I kind of hope they cover. Ole Miss also kind of has the distraction of the whole Lane Kiffin situation and where he's going to go. Apparently, there's going to be some announcement by Saturday after the game. It's just, there's a whole lot going on with that situation to, really know where the team's head's at. Because, LSU, they just offered Lane Kiffin $90 million over 7 years, I believe, and they also made a promise in their contract that they would pay $25 million a year for NIL. So he would have so much money at his disposal for recruiting. And that is a hard offer to turn down. I don't know how he's going to turn that down. But, before that contract, I've been saying that Lane Kiffin is probably going to stay at Ole Miss. But now, I really don't know. So, I think Ole Miss wins, but I think Mississippi State will probably cover the spread here. Arizona State, this one, I think, at one point in the year, I think people probably would have said, oh, Arizona State's probably going to blow Arizona out again. This time, I don't think so. I think Arizona, even though it's at Arizona State, I think Arizona could steal the win because they've been on a hot streak. They blew out Baylor last week, or on Saturday. They put up 41 on Baylor and held Baylor to, I believe it was 17 points. So I really like the way this Arizona team has been playing the past couple of weeks. They've just been blowing teams out. So I think Arizona comes out with the win here. I think Arizona probably won't be favored, obviously, because it's at Arizona State and Arizona State's ranked. But I think Arizona wins that game, hands down. I think they win that outright. By how much? Don't know, but I think it'll be by a decent amount. They're also going to want vengeance from last year after the Trident planting. Then there's Iowa, Nebraska. I think, both teams have been, they played pretty bad games last week, so I think this will probably be a low-scoring game. Nebraska in November has been really abysmal since Matt Rule has taken over. I believe he's 2-9 now, so that's worse than Cristobal. So, that says a lot because I've been ripping on Cristobal. So give me Iowa here to beat Nebraska, even though it's at Nebraska. All right, Michigan State, Ohio State. This is the last one that I'm going to have time to get into, but Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan obviously down one of their star running backs. Ohio State, this past Saturday, they didn't have Carnell Tate and they didn't have Jeremiah Smith. They're coming back, though, against Michigan. So I think, even though it's at Michigan, I think this is the year that Ohio State finally wins the game. I think they finally win the game. Finally. I think it's time. I really do. Ohio State, I don't think has been tested the same way that Michigan's been tested this year. I think it'll be a close game, but I think Ohio State will come out on top. And I think the question for this game, the key thing Michigan is going to have to do is pressure Julian Sayin because he is not the most mobile quarterback. He's a great pocket passer, but he is not very mobile. So if Michigan is able to pressure him enough, then I think Ohio State could lose that game. So, yeah, that's all that I have time for today. Tune in next Monday at 6 in the morning or head over to Spotify, Patreon, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. Search up Slide Into Sports, and it should pop up. And there's other content that I post on Patreon as well. I post my rankings there. I post my 10 ESPN pick'em picks, and I post other stuff there as well. It's more like written content. So yeah, I would maybe subscribe to the Patreon, if you want. But yeah, see you guys next time. Slide out.